Found Steve's ex's old note calling out his cleaning habits, causing a fight over our chores, and I need to address it without blaming her or him. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and my boyfriend, Steve, 30, and I have been together for 2 years, living together for 8 months. One afternoon, as I was cleaning our apartment, I stumbled on a note tucked away at the very back of an old cabinet. The handwriting caught my attention, so I unfolded it and read, "Dear Steve's future girlfriend, I know it's you reading this because he'd never clean back here. I'm putting this here because I'm leaving him soon and want to warn you about him. 1. He will not clean. 2. He will not listen. 3. He will make everything feel like it's your fault. It's not your fault, he's just an incompetent man. I'm leaving him, I suggest you do the same. Best wishes, Natalia." Shocked, I brought the note straight over to Steve to hear what he had to say. The second he saw it, he ripped it up and insisted I shouldn't take a word of it seriously. According to him, Natalia was crazy and untrustworthy, and this was just another manipulative thing she did. But what bothered me most wasn't even the content of the note, it was the fact that he hadn't found it in 5 years. I pressed him about that. If he's never cleaned so deeply that a note has lingered for 5 years, what does that say? Plus, I pointed out that lately he'd been doing even less cleaning since we moved in together. He got defensive and said none of this was an issue until I read the note, that his ex was still managing to manipulate and ruin his life, and I was now letting it happen too. The argument just went in circles after that. Frustrated, I packed a bag and spent the night at a friend's place to clear my head. Steve has been a wonderful boyfriend in many ways. He gets along beautifully with my family, gives me sweet gifts and flowers, and is always quick to tell me how much he loves me. He wasn't wrong that I hadn't really brought up cleaning before. But reading that note forced me to realize he'd started doing less as time went on, and it made me want to actually talk about it in a real way. After I left, Steve texted me saying he was sorry I felt I had to go, but that it was a jerk move for me to take a note over our 2-year relationship and just leave him and our pets behind. Now I'm left feeling totally stuck, unsure what, or, frankly, who, to trust. Sometimes I wonder if I should try to find and reach out to Natalia. Her real name is distinctive enough that I could probably track her down. Steve just wants me to come home, forget about a note from the past, and stop letting it control our future. Part of me questions myself, am I the problem here? Steve always made Natalia sound manipulative, petty, impossible to trust. But the nagging feeling just won't go away. I realized I hadn't really explained enough about the cleaning situation. When Steve and I first moved in 8 months ago, things felt fair, a solid 50-50 split. That balance has eroded steadily. Lately, I'm doing about 70% of the cleaning, sometimes 60% if he actually steps up when I ask, which totally depends on the week. More and more often, I have to remind him just to bring his dirty plates to the sink, or ask him to take out the trash, tasks I never had to prompt before. If I don't keep up with the dishes, they'll just sit and fester, sometimes so long that mold grows on the plates. I don't like confrontation, I just quietly ask him to help when it got too much. But since finding the note, I've stepped back and questioned the pattern. I tried using the note to have an honest conversation about our split in chores and how I was feeling. But he fixated so hard on me believing his crazy ex that he wouldn't listen to any of my actual concerns. He accused me of using confirmation bias, that no matter what he said, I'd just paint him as the villain. For the record, I haven't left him for good. This all exploded only yesterday, and I just needed space for one night because he wouldn't let the argument end until I agreed to move past it. I'm heading back today, hoping to be able to talk to him with a clearer head. My plan now is to go back and, first off, apologize for bringing him the note so abruptly. I get how hard it is to have some old message from an ex show up years later, and I need to validate that his feelings about it are real. But I also need to stand firm. Everyone's right, I've let this slide too long. I can't be in a relationship where I'm constantly begging someone to clean. The fact that the shelves hadn't been touched in 5 years, through a major move and everything, tells me I can't dismiss the note out of hand. I love Steve, and I don't want to throw away 2 years together. But I'm going to lay it all out for him. We need clear expectations, hard boundaries, and assigned chores. Cleaning is a deal breaker for me, it's about respect and partnership. From here on out, the ball's in his court. It's up to him to decide what happens next. Update 1. I followed your advice and tried to have a calm, honest discussion with Steve. When I apologized for the way I confronted him with the note, he immediately latched onto that as some kind of confession of guilt, shutting down the conversation before it could even begin. I even came prepared, just like many of you suggested, with a list of very specific examples where he hadn't pulled his weight cleaning around the apartment. But as soon as he saw the list, he accused me of being manipulative, just like his so-called crazy ex. That's when it really clicked for me. All those red flags you all pointed out about his past relationship were absolutely true. When it became clear he wasn't going to listen, I tried to just walk away, but he actually tried to physically block me from leaving the room. That was it for me. At that moment, I knew it was completely over. 2 years of my life spent on someone who couldn't even let me leave the room peacefully, but honestly, I'm relieved to have had the wake-up call now, before things got even deeper. I decided to let him cool off for a couple of days, and then I'm going to ask my brother to come with me to collect my things while Steve is out at work. He keeps to a strict schedule, so I think this will work. I've actually decided I will leave a note behind, probably something a little more thoughtful this time, with advice to not show it to him. I'm going to put it in the exact same spot, so, if he doesn't learn his lesson about cleaning, that note will just keep coming back to haunt him. All he really needs to do is clean. The biggest twist in all of this has been Natalia. I didn't reach out to her, instead, she reached out to me. Apparently, Steve was so desperate he borrowed a friend's phone and called her, screaming that she's still ruining his life. The fact that she had blocked his number but he still had it memorized just drives home that he was the unhinged ex, not her. Natalia actually found me on social media because she wanted to check in and make sure I was okay. She was especially worried that Steve might try to gaslight me, like he did to her. I was genuinely grateful she left me that note and saved me a mountain of wasted time. We've even set a date to grab coffee on Thursday, something I never would have expected when all this started. So, thank you for all the advice, especially whoever directed me to the Love is Respect website. I took the healthy relationship quiz after our argument, and, unsurprisingly, the results weren't great. You really called it when you noticed how he was slowly conditioning me for an unhealthy relationship. I'm just grateful I saw it before it was too late. Update 2. First, I want to make it clear, for anyone questioning my decision, that I didn't break up a 2-year relationship just because of a note or some chores. No, I ended it because whenever I tried to come up with solutions for an unequal situation, his response was to yell at me and insist the only problem was me. The final straw came when he physically blocked me from leaving the house while screaming at me. That is absolutely not okay. No one should stay with a man who responds to conflict like that. Last night, I texted the whole situation to my friend Natalia. She thought it was great, and she, like some others, immediately asked about the pets. For some context, one of the things that first drew me to Steve was our shared love for little creatures. I truly thought that if he could take such intricate care of his lizard, he'd do the same for me. I couldn't have been more wrong. Steve had a lizard he bought before we met, and together we got 2 frogs. I had brought my snake when I moved in. Initially, I wanted to wait until Steve cooled down before grabbing my things, the frogs, and my snake. I honestly believed he'd never hurt them. But Natalia changed my mind. She reminded me of how destructive he could get when he was angry, and suddenly I was terrified for the safety of my little guys. I couldn't bring myself to wait after that. I reached out and arranged a meeting with the landlord early the next morning. Natalia and I ended up FaceTiming that same night, talking everything through. She's a lawyer, and she let me know that in our state, landlords have to let you out of a lease if there's domestic violence. She told me his yelling, gaslighting, and especially his refusal to let me leave were all forms of abuse. That was a hard truth to sit with, but taking the Love is Respect relationship quiz really helped me see it for what it was. All the ways he was always messaging me, dictating what I wore, controlling where I went, those were all signs of abuse, too. This morning, Natalia came with me to talk to the landlord, along with my brother for extra support. As soon as the landlord heard the word lawyer, he jumped into action. He let me break the lease, though I'd still have to pay for all of August, even though I was leaving 3 days early. That seemed fair enough to me. To help, he messaged Steve, saying the apartment needed to be empty all day for emergency maintenance so I could pack and go. Steve replied that he'd be at work until 6 p.m. and wouldn't be home. When I got inside, the place was a nightmare. He'd smashed my dishes, special ones I'd brought with me, and left the shards everywhere. My clothes were ripped and scattered all over the bedroom. It was disgusting and absolutely heartbreaking. He hadn't done anything to his lizard, but he'd opened the tank doors for our frogs, and for my snake. Thankfully the frogs were still in the enclosure, but my snake had gotten loose. I was livid. She could have gotten hurt on all the broken plates. By sheer luck she was just hiding in the closet corner, and I was able to get her back into her enclosure safely. I packed all my things up and now, as my brother drives me to my friend's house, I feel both raw and relieved. Natalia let me in on a secret. She actually left Steve 3 notes, one in the cabinet, one on the underside of the vacuum, and one in the crumb tray of the toaster. While we were there, we checked to see if they were still hidden. The vacuum one was, but apparently Steve had cleaned the crumb catcher at least once in 5 years. He'd never mentioned finding any note to me, so I was caught by surprise. We left the vacuum note where it was, and replaced the cabinet one. I didn't want to sign my name this time, so I added a handout about healthy versus unhealthy relationships, and a QR code to the quiz that helped me wake up. Natalia said that if he hadn't found the other notes in these 5 years, not even after moving, he probably wouldn't now. I agreed. Clearly he found one but didn't bother cleaning the rest of the house to look for more. At this point, so much about Steve just doesn't make sense to me. Seeing the apartment wreck really made it sink in that I never really knew him. The Steve I thought I loved would never put animals in harm's way. But I don't think I ever really knew Steve at all. To anyone who thinks it's pathetic to end a relationship over chores and Reddit, I beg you to reconsider how abuse begins. The tiny, subtle things add up. That revelation is what empowered me to get out before things got worse. I've also booked my first session with a therapist. Thankfully my job is excellent insurance, so I should be able to work through this. I want to focus on boundaries and breaking my people-pleasing habits so I never wind up in this kind of situation again. Natalia and I even got a laugh out of all the people who suggested we'd make a cute couple. She's engaged to a wonderful man, someone who actually cleans, listens, and reflects. She told me there's a phenomenon where, once you break up with an awful ex, your soulmate sometimes follows soon after. I hope that's true. Even if it's not, I know I got a truly great friend out of this. Natalia is a fellow snake mom, after all. Let this be my final update. Abuse doesn't just start all at once. At first, there's love bombing, gifts, pretty words. Then, they start testing the limits of what you'll tolerate. You should never have to put up with anything, especially moldy, freaking plates. I haven't posted in a while and I'm not sure if anyone will see this, but I need to get this off my chest. Forgive me if it's rambling, I'll go in order as best I can. When I went back to the apartment, I made sure to take pictures of all the damage. Natalia told me I could press charges if I wanted. She couldn't represent me herself because of a conflict of interest, but she offered to help find someone. Excellent. At first, I wanted to just walk away. Then it hit me, someone commented that even just making a report could help create a record, so if a future girlfriend ever needed to be believed, she'd have it. Natalia had saved me, and I wanted to do the same for someone else. So, a couple days later, I pressed charges. The police went to interview Steve and the landlord. Between the trash department and the police on the scene, the landlord decided to evict Steve. So, by destroying my things, Steve pretty much destroyed his own life. My boss was kind enough to give me a week off work so I could get my head straight and find a new place to live. The rent is higher, but at least the space is my own. When I eventually returned to work, Steve was parked outside in the lot. Immediately, I got my phone out and started recording. My lawyer told me to document everything. I wanted to walk into my building, where I'd be surrounded by people, and he was just sitting there, farther away, watching. Adrenaline surged through me as I tried to rush away, naively thinking I could make it to the door before Steve caught up. I was wrong. Just a few feet from safety, I felt his hand clamp around mine. At first, he tried to sound calm, telling me he wanted to apologize because I hadn't answered his calls. I stood my ground and told him we were done, demanding he leave me alone as I struggled to free myself. That's when his mood snapped. He yanked me closer and started yelling about how I'd ruined his life and that I owed him something. All the noise must have drawn attention, because suddenly one of my coworkers came out to check on me. He's a big guy, much taller than Steve, and just his presence made Steve back off fast. I took the chance to tell Steve to leave and never bother me again, and this time, he listened and left. Luckily, we got the whole incident on video, and together with several days' worth of security footage showing Steve lurking around the parking lot, my lawyer was able to get a restraining order against him. Since then, Steve stayed away. He ended up taking a plea deal and, thank God, he has no idea where I live now. I finally feel like I'm in the clear. I waited to talk about all this until things calmed down, but I'm actually doing better. I've been to multiple therapy sessions. Natalia and I have hung out a few times now, and the last time we saw each other, Steve's name didn't even come up once. My workplace has totally rallied around me. I even have a coworker escorting me from my car to the door now. Things are finally looking up. Update 3. I once found a hidden note from my boyfriend's ex, and that simple act ended up changing my life. I was trapped in a relationship that, at first, just seemed rocky, but slowly morphed into something that made me feel small and powerless. If it hadn't been for Natalia, his ex, the hidden note, and her warning, I might never have gotten out. That note was tucked away, half buried under a loose drawer in the bathroom. I still get chills thinking about it. All it said was, if you're reading this, run. At first, I thought it was a joke, some weird prank between lovers, but as things escalated in my relationship, every word of that note burned in my mind. After I finally left him, Natalia somehow got in touch with me. She'd been through it all, the love bombing, the emotional swings, the screaming matches that suddenly twisted as if I was the problem, not him. When we went to his apartment together to collect my last few things, I saw what he'd done, my belongings trashed, holes punched through the walls. I took pictures of everything, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. Natalia, now a lawyer, told me I could press charges if I wanted. She couldn't represent me for legal reasons, but promised to find me someone trustworthy. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to make it all real, I just wanted it to all go away. Then I remembered a single comment I'd read somewhere: making a report creates a record. That record could help some future girlfriend if, God forbid, she ever needed it. Natalia had saved me, and I wanted to do the same for someone else who might come after me. A few days later, I pressed charges. The police interviewed Steve and the landlord. The evidence was damning. My destroyed things, photos, texts, everything stacked up against him. The landlord had had enough. Steve was evicted. By lashing out at me and demolishing my belongings, Steve had destroyed his own life. After that storm, my boss showed me incredible kindness and let me take a week off from my job as a physical therapist. I scrambled to find a new apartment, even though it cost more, but at least it put a roof between me and my past. When I returned to work, I spotted Steve's car idling in the parking lot. My heart pounded, I could hardly breathe. Remembering my lawyer's advice, I held my phone in my hand, recording. I told myself if I just hurried, I could make it inside before he caught up. 5 feet from the door, his hand seized mine. At first, his voice was low and sickly sweet. He wanted to apologize. When I told him to leave me alone, he squeezed harder, his words turning venomous, blaming me for his ruined life, saying I owed him. The noise attracted one of my coworkers, a huge guy compared to Steve. Steve let go and slunk away. I told him never to come near me again. The footage from my phone, plus security camera evidence, him circling the parking lot, waiting for my shift to start, was enough for my lawyer to get a restraining order. Steve's left me alone since. He eventually took a plea deal and has no idea where I live now. I think I'm finally in the clear. Life is better now. I attend therapy regularly, and Natalia and I have become friends. The last time we met, Steve's name didn't even come up. My workplace has been a sanctuary. Coworkers now walk me to my car, and their support has made me feel safe for the first time in ages. I'll never forget the quote Natalia shared. Many survivors have been motivated to heal by the courage of other survivors. Every time a survivor reveals her history to a friend, stands up in front of a group to tell her story, writes a book, or brings a lawsuit against abusers, or the institutions that allow abuse to occur, she inspires other survivors to break the silence. I hope my story might help someone else, the way Natalia helped me. Holding on to hope, and the power of speaking out, was what finally set me free. Update 4. This whole ordeal truly changed my life. Looking back, it was incredibly hard to endure, but the wisdom and advice I received along the way helped me find safety and eventually begin rebuilding what I have now. Through it all, I developed a new appreciation for the power of community, and, admittedly, a low-key obsession with this one podcast that kept me company through the hardest nights. After my ex confronted me so suddenly in the parking lot where I worked, I realized just how unsafe I felt. I knew I couldn't stay any longer and, thankfully, found another job in a different state almost a month later. Packing my life and leaving behind everything familiar was terrifying, but I took the leap. It turned out to be the best decision. Everyone who said the worst man predates your soulmate was absolutely right. Now, I live just a block away from a library. It was there, surrounded by shelves of books and the comforting hush of pages turning, that my life took the unexpectedly sweet turn I never saw coming. The librarian, quiet, thoughtful, and with a quirky sense of humor, started chatting with me one day. At first, I was hesitant and nervous, but his gentle kindness won me over. He asked me to meet for coffee in a public place, and that was it. We've been together ever since, and I had no idea love could feel like this. He does my dishes every time he comes over, unasked, like it's no big deal. The other day, when I realized I was almost out of granola, I quietly added it to my mental grocery list. The next morning, there was a fresh, unopened bag in the pantry. He noticed before I even said a word and picked it up for me, the kind of little gesture that still catches me off guard. He cooks for me, insists on doing the cleaning up, and keeps telling me he's just doing what anyone should do. My standards have completely changed because of him. Raspberry is thriving, too. The move was tough on her, but she pulled through. As a reward, I got her an even bigger enclosure, and she's made herself right at home. My boyfriend loves her. Sometimes I catch the two of them booping noses, which makes my heart melt. Natalia and I keep in touch, mostly through TikTok links we send each other occasionally. That's pretty much the extent of our relationship now. I know people wanted us to become inseparable friends, some even joked about us dating, but honestly, we remind each other too much of everything we're trying to leave behind. For both of us, letting go is easier from a distance. As for Steve, after getting the temporary restraining order, there wasn't much else that happened between us. I did reach out to the police about the things he destroyed, but all the meetings and the looming possibility of seeing him in court made me reconsider. It was around $500 in damages, but no amount was worth sacrificing my mental health for. I found out later that the landlord evicted him and considered suing for the damage. Steve had actually smashed shelves in the sink, though interestingly, he left his PC untouched. The landlord asked if he could use the photos Natalia had taken right after I'd left. Last I heard, the legal process was still ongoing. I hate to admit this, but the police seem to care more about the landlord and his property than about what happened to my clothes, plates, or even my snake. Still, I sincerely hope the landlord pushes through and Steve is held responsible for his actions. As for those notes I left behind, I have no idea if they're still there. I hope so. I hope any future girlfriend of his finds them and gets out before she gets pulled in too deep. Regardless, I feel like I've done my part. Now, it's time for me to heal and move forward with my life. My final piece of advice, if anyone out there feels like their relationship has turned into a slide, where you keep giving more than you receive, and find yourself slipping further and further into an imbalance, speak up. The way your partner reacts will tell you everything you need to know. 1 year update. It's wild how ordinary my life looks now. I wake up in a place that feels like mine, I pour coffee at a kitchen counter that isn't haunted, and there's a library card on our fridge with a smiley face sticker on it because my boyfriend thought the magnet looked lonely. In the best way, nothing is dramatic anymore. Except this part. A few months ago, Natalia texted me a screenshot with no context, just a photo of a loose sheet of paper on cheap rental laminate, the handwriting I knew immediately. If you're reading this, run. Then a second photo, the vacuum overturned, and my stomach dropped seeing the tape residue under the base plate that meant the other note had been pulled off, too. The woman who sent them to Natalia introduced herself a day later in a long message. She'd been living with Steve since winter. She'd found the cabinet note while pulling out old bleach bottles because the kitchen smelled off, and then she'd checked the vacuum just in case because of the line about never cleaning back there. She told us she sat on the edge of the bathtub for an hour with both pieces of paper in her lap and an Apple Notes list of the last 6 months, and for the first time, it didn't feel like she was crazy. She called her sister, packed a duffel, and left while he was at work. We met for coffee 2 days later. I don't know what I expected. She was younger than me by a couple years, soft-spoken, wearing those tiny gold hoops everyone has right now. She slid the notes across the table like contraband. The cabinet one was a little grimier, 5 years of dust and one more round of shock baked into the paper. The vacuum one looked exactly how I remembered it looked when we stuck it there. I asked if she was safe and she nodded. She moved in with her sister temporarily. He texted, called from a different number, then showed up at her job once, but she'd already made a report and the restraining order on file popped when the officers ran his name. He spent the weekend in county because he wasn't allowed to approach anyone else tied into my case. When she said those words, I felt a weird, fierce gratitude for every boring phone call I had made and every form I filled out. I didn't realize how far the radius of that paperwork could reach. She told us something that made me stupidly tear up in the middle of the cafe. He had a gecko now. When she left, she took him with her. I wasn't going to leave him, she said, almost apologetic, like she needed my permission. I told her about Raspberry and how I had pictured the worst possible outcome sitting on the floor of my old apartment. She showed me a photo of the gecko under a piece of cork bark, eyes half shut, a tiny dinosaur blissed out under the warm light. I hated that it mattered to me, but it did. The little things we save count. Later, she told me he'd called her from a blocked number to yell about the cabal of ex-girlfriends hiding notes, and I had to step outside and put my head between my knees because I laughed so hard. The only other thing she wanted to know was whether it ever stops feeling like you're waiting for a door to slam. I didn't tell her it always does. I told her it fades until you realize it's Wednesday and you haven't thought about it since Friday. In my present, the librarian and I signed a lease together. We did it in the most anticlimactic way possible, standing at a folding table in an office with beige carpet, handwriting our initials on line after line while Raspberry was at home in a temporary bin because her enclosure was already packed. The first week, I kept bracing for the shift, waiting for the slow creep of damp dishes and resentment. Instead, I watched him move the fridge without being asked because he wanted to vacuum the dust bunnies, and he left me a grocery store bouquet for our new grout. I still flinch sometimes when I say, "Hey, can you take out the trash?" Expecting the tight jaw or the sigh, and every time he just says, "Yep," and then he does it. It turns out that no matter how many therapy sessions you go to, having someone rinse a lasagna pan before it becomes a fossil will heal something in you that you didn't know could be healed. 2 weeks after we moved in, I opened the toaster to shake the crumb tray into the sink and a folded index card slid out. I froze so hard that everything in me went white noise. He was behind me immediately. "It's a joke," he blurted, hands up like he was being pulled over. "I'm so sorry, I thought it would be funny, I shouldn't have, do you want me to throw it out?" I picked it up with shaking fingers and unfolded it. In his neat, tiny print, "If you're reading this, please don't run. I'm in the living room making pancakes. Bring the butter when you're ready." I laughed until I cried, and then I cried until I laughed again, and there's this strange tenderness in being with someone who can recognize how to turn a razor into a ribbon without ever pretending the blade was never there. Natalia got married in the spring. Her dress had sleeves that looked like clouds. Everyone cried at the vows, but the moment that knocked the wind out of me happened in the bridal suite when it was just us and a bobby pin disaster. She hugged me and said, "I'm so glad we both got out." It wasn't a grand statement, just a fact. Her husband danced like an adorable idiot, and the photographer did one cheesy setup with the groomsmen in sunglasses that made me groan. I went home with an extra slice of cake and a stack of photo booth strips where I look like someone I haven't seen in a long time, open, unburdened. There was one more full circle moment I didn't expect. The library did a community night in June with little tables from local organizations. The director asked if I would help set up because I'm good with people in that way that really means you can carry a conversation and fold a tablecloth at the same time without breaking a sweat. I was walking around taping down corners when I recognized the logo for the Domestic Violence Resource Center Natalia had told me to keep in my phone. I stood there holding a roll of blue painter's tape and watched strangers pick up pamphlets and free pens, chat, smile. It felt like watching a fire break, spaces carved out so the flames can't jump, so the worst thing doesn't spread as far the next time wind picks up. I'm not naive about any of this. He's still out there. The order is still in place. I still double-check my locks and sometimes I catch myself scanning parking lots like a meerkat. But life moves forward in ways that are almost boring in how good they are. Raspberry has taken to wedging herself into the fake skull hide we put in her new enclosure so it looks like she's piloting it, and it makes me laugh every single time. The librarian restocks the stupid granola before I notice we're out. He replaced the squeaky hinge on the cabinet that used to make me jump. One night in July, he asked me to grab a book from the coffee table while he finished drying a pan, and when I opened it there was a checkout card tucked inside with his handwriting. Due date, forever. He looked like he was going to faint, and I said yes while still holding the dish towel. The last thing I did before we went to bed that night was flip our vacuum over and unscrew the base plate. I slid an index card into the cavity where the belt sits, taped it in place, and wrote to exactly one person, "You are safe here. You don't have to keep score. Love, me." Then I told him it was there, just in case we ever sell it or it ends up at a yard sale in 20 years and I don't want to be responsible for someone else's heart pounding for no reason. He kissed my knuckles like I was made of glass and then asked if he could add something. He took the pen and wrote, "P.S. I already cleaned behind the fridge." 18-month update. It was around 9 when my upstairs neighbor knocked, the shy kind of knock that sounds like she almost changed her mind during the second tap. When I opened the door, she was holding the saddest spaghetti night I've ever seen, half a jar of marinara in her hand and noodles sticking to the inside of a colander like hair to a shower wall. "Do you have a vacuum I could borrow?" she asked, and then, like she couldn't help it, I dropped the jar. "He's sleeping. We've shared silent elevator rides and a couple nods by the mailboxes, that's it." Up close, I could see she'd been crying and doing that thing where you think if you move gently enough, nothing else will spill. I didn't ask questions. I got our vacuum. I told you I'd buried a note in there for myself, the one that says, "You are safe here. You don't have to keep score. Love, me." I meant it as a private charm against old ghosts. I also told him where I put it. We joked about yard sales. I didn't plan for a marinara emergency. She took the vacuum like it might bite, and when I offered to come up and help, she shook her head fast. 5 minutes later, there was another hesitant knock. She stood in the doorway holding the base plate in one hand and my index card in the other, eyes so big I thought for a second she was about to faint. "I think this is yours," she said, but she didn't move to give it back. Something in the air shifted. Very carefully, I reached for the card. "Do you want to come in?" I asked. We made tea we didn't drink. She sat on the edge of our couch like a bird on a wire and stared at the carpet and then the note and then at me. "I know it's not about me," she said. But it felt like it was. The marinara was still in her hairline. I am not a hotline. I am not a therapist. But I remember what it felt like to have a stranger's handwriting make the hallway inside my head light up, to feel words land like a floor under my feet. So I did the two things I'm qualified to do. I handed her a towel and pointed to the sink, and I opened my contacts and found the number the resource center had told me I could always share. He got home halfway through blow-drying the rug. We heard the apartment door slam upstairs like a body hitting a wall, the kind of slam that is a message. She flinched so hard she knocked my tea over. My fiancé, still so fun to type, did the exact thing I love him for in every other context. He didn't look at me to make sure he was doing the right thing, he just acted. Keys picked up, shoes on, quiet voice. "My car is out front," he said. "If you want to leave, we can go right now." She swallowed and nodded. She took nothing with her except the colander and my vacuum. There's something a little funny about that in hindsight, that she ran out clutching both like armor. We weren't dramatic. We went down the back stairs. We didn't turn on the dome light. I texted the resource center and got a reply before we hit the street. They had a bed. We drove there. The building looked like an accountant's office, which I think is the kindest thing it could have looked like. She kept the vacuum on her lap the whole time, fingers steady now on the handle. When the intake counselor said, "Can you tell me your name?" she spoke it like she'd been practicing alone in a mirror. I didn't see the next part, I only know it like a story in 2 frames. First frame, she went back with an advocate 2 days later to get a few things. Second frame, the locksmith came at 11 the next morning. Our building manager taped a note to the elevator that said, "Key fob protocols will be updated this afternoon." It felt like watching a spine slide back into place. He did come knock on our door that night. I didn't write this part because I wanted it to be over, but here we are. He didn't know which neighbor we were to her. He went down the whole hallway like a salesman, except angrier. My heart raced the way it always will when a fist meets wood. My fiancé stood perfectly still with his hand on the deadbolt and his shoulders set like a wall. We didn't open it. We didn't talk. We started recording. The knock moved on. 10 minutes later, the manager sent an email reminding everyone about quiet hours and attaching the building's policy on harassment like it was a polite recipe. I forwarded all of it to the advocate. Yesterday, a plain envelope came in the mail addressed to us in someone else's neat print. Inside was a postcard with 3 sentences. "I'm safe. I kept the vacuum too long, I promise I'll bring it back soon. Thank you for having a note where I could see it." My fiancé set it on the fridge next to the smiling library card magnet and then, like he couldn't help himself, he flipped the vacuum over and wrote an arrow with a Sharpie next to the screws. "If you are curious, you will be fine." We did the other husband and wife in training things this month too. We picked up our marriage license and argued sweetly about which shade of navy is not funeral navy. Raspberry tried to escape because we messed up closing the hinges on her new enrichment cube and we had to bribe her back in with a thawed mouse on a dessert plate. My fiancé's mother sent me an apron with embroidered lemons and a note that said, "For when you cook things that do not stain," which made me laugh by myself in the kitchen. And then came the thing I didn't think I'd ever get, a call from a number I didn't recognize that I almost didn't answer because I was elbow deep in a bag of potting soil. It was the clerk's office in the county I left, saying my presence wasn't needed for a hearing that afternoon because he'd failed to appear and the judge had entered a default judgment on the landlord's civil case. "This is just a courtesy call," she said, the way someone would tell you the library finally got the book you had on hold. I thanked her and watered the basil and stood there crying over a dumb plastic pot like the plants had written me an apology. We went back to the library that night for a trivia fundraiser in the meeting room. The team name we chose was too long, and my fiancé got way too competitive about whether Pluto counts as a planet, and I somehow won a raffle for a gift basket that was 90% candle and 10% bath bomb. It felt like a bribe from the universe for answering phone calls you don't want to answer. On the way out, I stopped at a table piled with discarded paperbacks and the sign that always gets me, "Fill a bag for $1." Sitting there under a sun-faded Nora Roberts was an old housekeeping guide from 1983 with a woman smiling on the cover like she's about to have a love affair with a mop. I picked it up because irony is my favorite flavor. Something about it felt too heavy. I flicked the pages and an index card fell out, tucked into a chapter called Making Your Home a Sanctuary. In loopy, earnest pen, someone had written, "If he's mean to the dog, leave." On the back, in a different hand, "And if he apologizes with gifts, still leave." I put my hand on the table and laughed so sharply the man running the cash box looked up like I was choking. Sometimes the world feels like an aquarium we're all tapping on from different sides. I bought the book, of course. It's in our bathroom now as a relic. Under the chapter on dusting, I penciled a note to myself: "If you're reading this, remember to run toward things too." Natalia texted me 3 photos last week, a sonogram that looks like a small storm cloud, her husband's dumb grinning face next to it, and a pair of tiny socks that say "Clean Up Crew." I wrote back exactly 4 scream emojis and I'm going to knit this child a snake hat. She said she came across the letter I wrote for her wedding day tucked inside the garment bag with her veil and cried on her closet floor for a while. "It still feels like stealing when I let myself have this much good," she admitted, and I sent a picture of Raspberry wearing a Halloween skeleton decoration like a crown. We're all learning how to let nice things just be nice. We set a date. We're doing it in the small reading room with the weird stained glass window that makes everything look like it's underwater at 5 in the afternoon. There won't be many people because my list of many feels like a lot after the year I've had. The director keeps tearfully insisting she's honored and also very nervous about the liability of open flame if we do candles. We picked our song. It's not the one I thought it would be. It's something that sounds like a sunbeam on the floor next to an open book. The same night we mailed the deposit, the upstairs neighbor knocked again. This time, she was smiling. She had the vacuum, cleaned and coiled, and a Tupperware full of lasagna that looked like it could piece back together the moral fabric of the world. We hugged like people who probably will never tell each other the worst parts, and that felt okay. Before I closed the door, she said, "Is it weird if I ask to keep the note?" And I shook my head so fast my ponytail slapped my neck. "It was always yours," I said, and meant it. After she left, I went around the apartment and did the silly ritual I've invented for myself without meaning to. I checked the lock, not because I don't trust it, but because I like the sound of it sliding home. I put the granola on the list. I moved a plant a quarter inch to the left. Ordinary things. We'd planned to watch a movie, but at 9:30 my fiancé came into the kitchen with his nervous purple look and a book in his hands. "One more thing," he said, because he learned early I need warnings before surprises. He opened to the back cover. He's been sneakily tucking notes into library cards for me for months, but this time it wasn't a date. It was 2 sentences. "If you're reading this, look at me. I'm still here." I did. He was. The vacuum was still humming in the corner like a sleeping thing. Somewhere upstairs, a door closed gently. The first time I found a note, I thought it was my exit. Lately, they've been invitations. I like living in a house where both are allowed. The locksmith came today to replace the building fobs and give us new codes. He smelled like dryer sheets and whistled while he worked. When he finished, he bent down behind our fridge for a second and popped back up holding a penny and a Lego pirate flag that we did not own. "Treasures," he said, and set them on the counter with a flourish. After he left, my fiancé wrote the date on the penny with a Sharpie. I taped the flag to the side of the vacuum like a joke trophy. When I flipped it over to stick it on, I saw the shadow of the tape where the note had been, that little rectangle of ghost adhesive. I ran my fingers over it, the way you touch a well-loved book as you put it away. I'm not going to pretend I don't still walk to my car like a meerkat or that I won't tense the first time someone in our hallway laughs too loud after midnight. But I'm also not going to pretend the world didn't multiply my tiny gesture and make it into a doorway for someone else. I keep thinking about that scrappy constellation of messages, the cabinet notes, the crumb trays, the index cards and laundromat bulletin boards and inside thrift store housekeeping guides and under vacuum base plates, and taped under reading lamps. All the ways we tell each other, run, stay, turn here, look up. It feels like the best kind of graffiti. The last thing we did tonight before bed was stick a new index card under our toaster crumb tray, because apparently this is who I am now. He wrote it this time. "If you're reading this," he put, "the toast is burning. But we're okay. Open a window." Then he handed me the pen. I added, "P.S. check behind the fridge." Someone probably already did. He laughed and kissed me between the eyes. Somewhere out there, a woman I've had coffee with twice is falling asleep without listening for footsteps. Somewhere else, a lizard under cork bark is blissfully unaware of any of us and also thriving. Tomorrow, the library will unlock its doors and my name will be on the schedule scribbled in dry erase marker and I'll answer a question about printer toner like it's the most important thing in the world.